Hi, Komel. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you could finally come on and we could connect. I'm so excited to talk to you about your life experiences. And you have such amazing titles. You've done incredible things in your career. I'm curious, when you take all of those things away, when you strip them all away, and I'm including if you're a mother, if you have a partner, you're a daughter, COO, when you take all that away, who are you?
That's such a good question. And I've been actually thinking about this a lot, through this founder journey as well, and through our founder story. And I was talking with someone recently, and at the end of the day, and it's because I never thought I would be where I am today professionally, because at the end of the day, I'm a first generation immigrant, like a child of immigrants from Pakistan who grew up in Bedford, Ohio, and so there's not, unfortunately, not a lot of women, not a lot of people who have my background and look like me, who come from like a small suburb in the Midwest, in Ohio. I don't Many people probably haven't heard of Bedford, Ohio. So fairly humble beginnings. And at the root, that is who I am. I identify with my culture and my heritage. I was raised by my parents as a first generation um, Pakistani American, and I grew up with a lot of Midwestern values, which I do appreciate to this day, even though I've now moved to the East Coast. And so I often think about it, and I hope through my work and what I do and what I've been able to achieve, I'm able to inspire not only those that look like me and have a background like me, but you don't see it that often.
It's beautiful. We just had someone on
Mhm.
that was also a first generation immigrant to the United States. She has such a fierceness to her. And women in general, I think, have a tenacity and grit. Very different. It comes from a different place. I'm curious if we can jump around just a little bit. I'm
Sure.
curious what that taught you being a first generation, as far as the values that you have from your parents, from a completely different culture,
Mhm.
and how that's made you who you are today. I'm really fascinated with that.
Oh, yes. So I don't want to say failure was not an option, because that sounds like my parents were like, you must, do this or that. I have incredible parents, and, my mother and my father both. And being immigrant parents from Pakistan, they encouraged us, and the culture is very beautiful, but we were encouraged, I think, more so than my friends and my peers to get an education, to be able to provide for ourselves. And my dad always said, the sky is the limit for you. Two daughters. And he, that was very different in like the early 80s and 90s when I grew up. He always was so supportive of us being who we wanted to be, achieving, what we thought we could in our careers, getting us the education that we wanted. That was always such a big highlight for us from both my mother and my father, was that we want you to be educated. We want you to go to whatever level of education that you want. And so there's that piece that was very, very strong. And we call our father the original entrepreneur. He's a veterinarian. He opened his own practice, and he came here with very, very little, $50-$70 in his pocket. He didn't have a family here to rely on. Like, we tell him, like, we had you and we had our mom as like our backbone and our safety net in case anything happened. We knew we could fail and we'd have that safety net. He didn't have that. He came here to start his family. He then got married and had children, and he had to do it all on his own. And so we learned that entrepreneurship and that value of hard work from our father.
Yes, because that's a different type of grit. Coming to a new country
Yes.
with financial insecurities and making it happen. I mean, I think entrepreneurship in a sense is a privilege because it is a choice. And
It
it's
is.
a very different type of choice where you're like, okay, usually people will have a backup or they do have a support system of some
Right.
kind, whereas your father didn't have that. So it's incredibly brave.
It was very brave. And, like, how did you end up in a suburb of, like, a small suburb of Cleveland, Ohio? It wasn't as diverse as New York or California or Chicago or one of the major cities. And so that being first generation also in a small suburb in Ohio also taught us some grit and resilience because we were some of the only people who looked like we did. And so, understanding that you were, a little bit different, but then finding your commonalities and navigating, cultural requirements or cultural things at home that were different than the culture you were experiencing in school and with your friends, just teaches you a lot about the world and teaches you some really wonderful things about different cultures and people and how you have a lot more in common than you think you do on the surface. So it was really interesting growing up in that community.
I agree. And I think adversity can spark change
Mhm,
in a very positive way. And I talk a lot about this within my brand,
mhm.
how in my business, I survived a rape. And there was so much fragmented care in healthcare, as you
Yeah.
probably understand better than most people.
Mhm,
And I didn't know where to go to. And so I created Fortify, now HIPAA compliant, which I know you know how hard that is to get. 360 approach to wellness, therapy, coaching, fitness, meditation, and one subscription platform because
mhm,
I understood after surviving a near-death experience that you need multiple facets and multiple hands to make light work. It's not one thing or the other. You need many different types of things. So
mhm,
I was like, why doesn't that exist on one platform? So I started Fortify. And as we've been going through the entrepreneurial journey and having different discussions with
mhm.
different women, specifically executives, they've found a lot of a lot of similar types of stories that I've had. But
Yeah.
really what I found is that what feels like rock bottom is oftentimes just to propel you to the next level. That,
Yes.
you have a choice. Your father had a choice. He could have stayed where he was, or he could have chosen, which he did, to move to the United States and be brave and make a life for himself and then his family. That's a choice. And so we all have choices. And I'm
Mhm.
curious for you, like have you had an adversity? I hope that it wasn't similar to mine, but did you have an adversity in your life that kind of propelled you to that next chapter in your life?
I did, which is interesting. I thought a lot about this before coming onto the podcast. Um, but there's multiple different adversities that you can face, and you can either choose to, not choose, but like, that can get you down, or you can learn and grow from that. And so I was married the first time at a very young age, by choice, but I was 20, and that didn't work out. I have a beautiful daughter from that marriage, but I got separated and divorced very young, and on my own at about 25 years old, as a single mom and living in New Jersey, which is expensive, more expensive than Ohio. And I had a choice to really focus on my daughter and my career and provide for her the way that my parents had always said, like, don't know if I have a husband now. It's very lovely, but you do not ever get yourself in a place where you have to depend on a man. Like, you want to be able to provide for yourself, and provide for your family when and if you need to. And so that was really a pivotal moment for me. I was still fairly young, 25, where I said, my parents were like, you can move home with us, until you get back on your feet. And I said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to provide for my daughter. I'm going to find a place to live. I'm going to apply to grad school, get my master's degree, and I'm going to be a good role model for herself, for her, for myself. And really put her and my career at the focus. And so that was a really big shift for me, because I was really on my own.
Wow. I mean, again, such bravery to go like, no, I'm actually gonna do this myself.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times we don't realize that we do have the choice, and to choose maybe the harder route, it oftentimes can pivot us into the direction that was meant for us.
Mhm.
And what a different feeling and emotion as a woman to have a daughter and go, no, I want to be an example to her. It's like a
Yes,
really powerful, thought,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know. And I'm interested in the work that you do with HerMD.
Mhm.
I see so many like synergies here with the way you grew up, into different adversities that you had in your early 20s, into building HerMD, revolutionary and women's healthcare, which is something I'm obviously very empowered by and something I'm very passionate about. I'm curious, like your personal experiences, the way you grew up,
Mhm.
how does this now align now with the work you do today?
It's pretty incredible. You know, the founding stories, we grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is an important part of the story. And I co-founded HerMD with my sister, Dr. Somi Javed, who's a board certified OBGYN. And so I never did think I would work with her because I sit on, the business side of things, marketing and branding and business. But we nearly lost our mother when she was just about my age. So I'll be 44 in February. We grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, the mecca of cardiology with the Cleveland Clinic. And we have a very, very strong family history of cardiovascular disease. She lost both of her parents to cardiovascular disease and multiple siblings in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s to cardiac events. And so she was 44, and she was complaining of left arm pain, chest pain, shortness of breath, jaw pain. And she was sent home repeatedly in Cleveland, Ohio. And they told her it wasn't her heart, that it was stress, it was anxiety, that her kids were stressing her out. We were pretty good kids. I don't think we were stressing her out that much. And they just told her to lay off the caffeine. And this went on for months. And it's because, she was a minority woman who was like 110 pounds, non-smoker, non-drinker. And so they couldn't explain why she would ever present with cardiovascular disease, despite the strong family history. So I still remember I was a sophomore in high school and I got called down to the office. And I didn't really get called down to the office, and my mother was there as well then. And they told us that our mom had been rushed emergently to the hospital. And, so we got to the hospital and we found out that she called 911. She had become so unstable in the ambulance. And once she got there, on the cath table, that she had to go into emergent surgery. And she ended up having quadruple bypass when she was 45 years old, which I thought at that time that was old. That's so young. That's so young. And I'm a mom now, and I can't imagine what she went through. She didn't see her kids. We didn't get to see our mom before she went in. And had she had a heart attack, she would have died, because the extent of the blockages were so bad. And so my sister was pre-med at the time. And so that was a very impactful moment in our lives, like to see that she was just dismissed and she could have lost her life because of not being believed, which so many women in the healthcare
Going
system
through that right now.
go
Yes.
through that right now, still to this day. And, that was 1995, 96, 96,
They're
97.
complacent. Not all doctors are, but some are. They're complacent.
Right. And they rely on data and they rely on research. And, women are underrepresented in research trials. They weren't even mandated to be included in research trials until the 90s. And so data couldn't explain why my mother at that age, being a woman and a non-smoker, non-drinker, would ever have cardiovascular disease. And so that was a moment for us, and especially my sister being pre-med at the time, where she was like, this isn't right. Like, women should not be dismissed. They should not be ignored. We should be believed. We should be taken seriously. And she wanted to create a place where, women would be heard. And so she went into women's healthcare and realized the current medical system, even as it is today, doesn't allow for that. So we partnered together to create a space and a place for women to get the care they deserve and to get time with providers. And, it's not providers' faults. Like my sister's a doctor and, they're limited by, the healthcare system that exists today with low insurance reimbursement rates and, having to see 40 or 50 patients a day to make it work. And it's just not feasible. It's not good for the patient. It's not good for the provider. And so that was like the impetus for us to start HerMD.
I agree. And I think, I met with a doctor actually today, a holistic doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost cried because it was the first time in a long time. He spent about 2 hours with me.
Wow. That's
Very
incredible.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. And he looked at me from a 360 perspective. Most of the time you walk into a doctor, they go through the list, they go, do you have this or this or this? And then they give you a medication and you leave. You can't really tell if they care or not. And that's so important.
Yeah.
I mean, he asked me about medical history, yes, and also psychological history,
Mm-hmm.
the things that you went through in your life. And that's needed. I mean, there is no like physical versus mental. It's mind, body, soul.
It is 100%. It's the biopsychosocial approach. And you have to address all of it together. But we're so compartmentalized with like, we're going to fix this one little piece of you or this one little problem where that can impact everything, right? Your overall wellness.
Yes. And so I think when it doesn't, again, not to everyone, but the doctors that are complacent and they don't dig in and they're not curious versus the ones that are, that's where you see the difference, And so the story about your mother, there's countless others, unfortunately, like that. And I'm curious with HerMD, how do you utilize this holistic approach within your practice to really revolutionize that idea that we're seeing?
100%. So the first thing we did was we developed care protocols. And so just after decades of, my sister being in patient rooms and listening to them and understanding also the problems in our healthcare system and how she says herself, how she was failing patients. She was failing patients. She was failing herself because she couldn't give them the time. She didn't have the time to listen. And so we developed care protocols that incorporate the questions, the things to ask about. So you're talking about the whole picture. And the first appointment, all of our appointments are 20 to 40 minutes, but that first appointment, you get 40 minutes with your provider. It does not have to include a physical exam. And so when you're in there for a health consult, a menopause consult, a sexual health consult, that is your time to talk about everything. Like, how are you being impacted? What is going on with your overall health and wellness? And then together, there's a treatment plan that could incorporate, mental health services. It could incorporate couples counseling. It could incorporate pelvic floor. It could incorporate a nutritionist. And so we have a robust referral network and system that we can go to for those partners when we craft the plan together. And then our providers are trained in, gynecology, menopause, sexual wellness. And so they have additional training that other providers don't because it's not part of the traditional medical system, unfortunately, to get a lot of menopause education or to get a lot of sexual health education. Sexual health education is around STIs and contraception and fertility. It's not around trauma. It's not around arousal disorder or sexual pain or orgasm dysfunction or low libido. That you have to get additional training for, even though issues with sexual health and wellness impact 43% of women. It's still not really a part of traditional medical training.
Yes, and I've noticed as I've been developing the app, I talked to a lot of medical doctors, and it's interesting from my perspective. I am not a medical doctor. I do have, a a degree in psychology, but I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
But I do come from a place where I understand the experience
Mhm.
of having doctors be complacent, have doctors not necessarily understand the trauma response after surviving a rape.
Right.
And the sexual, all the things that go on physically, all the
Mhm.
things that you were talking about, what goes on physically does affect your mind, body, soul. And I was
Yes.
talking to a medical doctor about this, and she's like, when I was at a treatment center doing research, we wanted people like you that had this experience to help inform
Yeah.
practices and the research methods. There's such a gap there of having people that have had lived experience going, yes to this,
Mhm.
or no to that, or because that's what they're missing right now in healthcare is feeling seen, feeling cared for, feeling like it's accessible.
Yes. Accessible and seen and heard. I mean, that's core. We've had all of our patients there, especially the new ones, they say how life-changing it is just to be able to be heard. And like the first time in years, decades, we're told that they were given time, that they weren't just, poo-pooed away, for lack of a better term, and said, it's all in your head. Oh, it's just something normal. You'll go through it. No, there's quality of life and there's, you know, physical issues and emotional issues, and they have to be addressed. We shouldn't just be getting through it. And there's so many treatment options and, therapies and over-the-counter solutions. There's so much available. So to just like say, yeah, there's nothing we can do for you is not okay. And so for us to give time back to the patients and give time back to providers who then are not burnt out at the end of the day from seeing 40 patients when they're seeing 15, 16 patients a day, that's markedly different. And they feel and know that they're making an impact on these patients' lives and they don't feel like they're failing. Like my sister felt she was failing. Yeah.
What a nice self-awareness though of going
Mhm.
like, this was a gap for me and I want to change it.
Yes.
And I'm always talking about filling up the cup,
Mhm.
and the oxygen mask on first. So I'm curious for
Yep.
you,
Yeah.
what do you do for yourself? Like you're giving to so many people. What do you do for yourself to manage your 360, your mind, body, soul on a daily basis?
I know, right? I'm like, be honest, I'm not like the best at it, although I am getting markedly better. And the first thing I did professionally was get myself a coach. And, I don't I think initially there I felt like, oh, I don't know if I want people to know I have a coach. Like that means there's something deficient in me professionally or something. I'm so proud that I have a coach. She's like my my oxygen sometimes because you have to take care of yourself professionally. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're raising capital, you're building a company, you don't have all the answers. And you know, you have to take care of yourself professionally and personally. And so she has been like a lifesaver the last 4 years for me. And then, it takes a while, or it took me a while to get to a place where it's like, you have to take time away. Because you can always work. You can there will always be the list. There will always be the projects. There will always be the people in your company that have joined you on this crazy ride and mission who believe in you and you want to do everything right by them. But if you're running on empty, you can't do that. And so it took me a while to get there and not, be that workaholic, working almost what felt like 24/7. And so for me, I listened actually to a TED Talk, and it was a short TED Talk, but it was really simple and it stuck with me. It was find the joy and find moments where you're laughing, because when you're laughing, everything feels better and you don't think about the things that are stressing you out. So when you need to fill your cup, do the things where you find yourself laughing and having fun. And so for me, spending time with my kids and my family, but doing the activities that bring me that joy, whether it's watching Michigan football or, NFL football or cooking fresh pasta with them, finding at least one moment a day where I can be laughing, because that releases the endorphins and you kind of forget about all that stress from work or the deadlines that are approaching, or, you know, the fundraising that you're going to have to go into, because at the end of the day, you're a person. And first and foremost, I'll go back to your original question, like outside of all the titles of everything, even mother, you know, partner, sister, you know, CEO, COO, whatever it is, you're a person at the end of the day with your own needs. And to not forget your identity as just a simple human is really important. It took me a while to get there, but I feel good now that I'm there.
And I think it can be hard to separate yourself from your business when you're so passionate about the business, but you almost have to be able to show up for yourself. You know, I go to a soul coach. To me, like my soul coach is better than any therapist I've ever had, to be honest with you. It's the ROI for that is that you get to show up differently. You
Yes.
get to execute so different, and you get to also show up for your team in such an authentic way and your family. And I'm just so much more self-aware. I have so much more patience. I mean, being in the mental health space period has given me so much more patience because I understand that people come from different lived experiences.
Yes.
And it shows up. And I do think it's a superhero power of mine that I can go, okay, I know where that's coming from there.
It is a huge, it's such a huge superpower. And, you know, realizing where everyone's coming from as a leader, because people are looking to you, but just being that person for your team is huge.
Thank you. Yes. I think as women, especially in tech and most likely in the medical space as well, women are, you know, few and far between, right? And they're looked upon in a different way. And I've done a lot of work on myself because, again, I promised myself that if I'm going to put out a product like this, I need to work on myself too. I can't just be like, I'm going to run the walk, you know, run the talk with you. I'm going to do it, the work with you. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of second guessing that we do, maybe even imposter syndrome that comes in the way, whether it's like your inner child saying that you can't do it. And the work and saying, yes, I can do it gives you just such an empowered place to come from, and you perform better. I've noticed it in the way that I show up and the energy that comes from me and from other people. And that's why I love having people like you on, because, you know, you show that light to other people that might be listening and going like, I can't do this because, or I came from this scenario, I can't do this because, like, you can. And you can overcome most anything. And I've overcome a lot. You've overcome a lot. And I think that I'm really excited about companies like yourself because you are building something that's going to help a lot of women feel seen. And when women don't feel seen, and especially when it comes to medical, I mean, it can lead to so much distress, understatement of the year, right?
Yes.
And so you're starting a very healthy approach to medicine, which is so needed and lacking. And that was actually part of the reason I started Fortify Wellness, because felt like the medical industry was failing me and I wasn't feeling seen, and I wanted to help make other people feel seen. So that's our kind of common alignment there, which is very cool.
It totally is. And I love that. And you're right. Like, as a medical community, we were and are failing people. We are. And so it's going to take people like you, other founders in the healthcare space. And I think we're getting people to sit up and pay attention and understand and really see that, you know, the status quo is not working. It's been failing. It's been failing a lot of people, millions and millions of people. And this generation of founders, this generation of patients, consumers, they're not going to be like our parents and the generations before who just like suffer in silence and think like, well, I can't impact change. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Like that's the takeaway that I want to give to people, is like, if you put your mind to it, you can be part of the change, you can impact change. And I think that I've seen more movement in the last couple of years than I've seen in many of the years prior, in terms of, we still have a marked way to go, don't get me wrong, but at least there are more people paying attention. There's more people listening, and there's more people who I think are understanding that this can't go on any longer and we have to change.
And I think it also takes, I mean, within yourself, going into a session with your doctor and asking questions,
100.
especially if they are complacent and they go, it's this, ask more questions, come beforehand and write out questions. I write out my medical history beforehand and I come in with questions, and then I go in more confident, because sometimes when you're in a session, it can feel overwhelming, but digging can promote change. I've seen it with myself. I've seen it with family and other people. And I think also it stems from self-love. Like, I deserve the right care. I love myself enough to know I want to ask questions and hold people accountable.
100%. I mean, we teach our patients, it's education, advocacy, and empowerment. Like, educate yourself, right? Those are our three core pillars, right? And that's why we put out education at HerMD at events, on the site, with your provider, et cetera. But, and advocate for yourself, just like you're saying, be prepped. A lot of times I think traditional medicine, we go in and, the provider, the doctor, the nurse practitioner, whoever it is, well, they're the expert, they know. And if they tell me it's in my head or it's not that, well, they know more than I do. And we just kind of used to walk away. Absolutely not. We tell our patients and people we talk to, even if they're not our patients, no one knows your body better than you. If something isn't right, document it, write down your questions, take your history in. And if they're still not listening, find someone who will listen, because you deserve it. Like, you deserve to be heard and taken seriously. And so they're not with you and your body every day. You're living that experience. And so kudos to you for taking your history, writing down your questions, and going in prepared, because for now, given the system that we're in, we have to advocate for ourselves.
Yes. And absolutely. I mean, complacency is not where I don't know that. I don't know that word. I can't relate. I don't think you can relate either.
So,
The complacency, I'm forever curious. Curiosity has gotten me into really, into this place now where we're launching this product, being curious about the world around me. And I'm sure you can relate to that as well. And it's disheartening that is the case, but I am excited with the work that you're doing with HerMD to start to change that. And people can change it within themselves by just asking the questions, holding their team accountable, and also that self-love journey of okay, I'm going to get a second opinion. I'm going to get a third opinion.
right.
And creative problem solving,
Yes.
So, and sometimes it's this, if you don't have an advocate, it can be disheartening too. If you don't have an advocate or a family member that can go, okay, let's try to go this avenue, so it can feel lonely. But I'm a huge component in advocating and speaking up for yourself and taking a beat and seeing what is the productive next step to go to with your health. It's the most important thing. Without your health, you have nothing. I learned that the hard way.
Exactly. No, it's true. It's true.
Yeah. So what do you have coming up with HerMD that you would like to share? We'd love to hear more.
We have a couple of exciting things that we're working on. One is expanding. I can't be super specific, but expanding our offerings and going into, well, we've always done skin health, but taking a deeper dive into skin health. And it's what you had said about, that compartmentalization. We want to alleviate that and provide comprehensive care under one roof. We also understand our patients, it's hard enough to go to that one appointment. And then when you go to that one appointment, you have a follow-up lab, you have a follow-up ultrasound. Oh, but you might have a skincare concern, or you might have, some other concern. So we want to be able to address as much as we can with our team. And so we already have on-site lab for blood work. We have on-site ultrasound. We have on-site minimally invasive procedures, but we're expanding the scope and breadth of skin health and thinking about, our skin being the largest organ of our body, really taking care of it. And so there'll be more to come there, certainly. And then in terms of also patient access, we will be launching some initiatives around prescriptions and RX, and just being able to allow our patients to access some of the medications that they need that maybe aren't covered by insurance, but they should be. That's a whole other topic to not get into. And so having that in our locations. And then we're also going to invest in a few devices that will allow for a better patient experience, in particular with annual exams and IUDs, because there is, we know, a lot of pain around IUD placement and also taking out IUDs. And so we already have a markedly better patient experience. We've pulled our data, but we're investing in some more technology to make it even better of an experience and less painful. And there's a lot of anxiety around annual exams. And so we're investing there as well to make it a more comfortable experience, to alleviate anxiety. So a lot that's focused around patient care, patient access, and patient experience.
I love the work that you're doing. And if we can support, let me know, because I'm all about empowering women and, again, easing the anxiety. It does, your health shouldn't have to cause stress.
No, it really shouldn't. And that's, that I would say for 2025 is our core focus, is focusing on the patient, their experience within HerMD, and how can we make it better? How can we just give them access to better solutions and make it easier for them to access those?
2025 is all about women and revolutionizing women's healthcare. I'm all for that. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. This was great.